Evolutionary Underground number 34. Spring Recomp Cycles with Geneza Pharma. This is going to be a really fun one. A lot of you have been giving us some really good feedback on these. You really like the way we talk about steroids and we talk about how to stack them and all that stuff. Really, this is the hardcore stuff you won't find in any other podcast. So, Geneza Pharma, they have a lot of different options. We're going to get into some of their steroids that they have. We're going to talk about which ones are best for recomp. We're going to talk a lot about Tren. So if you're a big Tren person, we're definitely going to talk a lot about Tren, all the options Geneza Pharma has. We're going to talk about the blends that they have that are really good for recomping that we recommend. We're going to talk about Geneza Pharma itself. We're going to talk about what recomping is. Mobster and I are going to kind of give you guys the definitions of what recomping is, because there is no exact definition, but there's an idea of what it's all about, obviously. And then we're also going to talk about other anabolic steroids that Geneza Pharma has that will help with your bulk. You don't have to use Tren, obviously, when you're doing a recomp. So we're going to give you other options if you don't want to use Tren, you don't want to deal with those side effects. And then we're going to finish out the show, if we have time, which we probably will, to give you some tips and tricks when it comes to having a successful recomp. So I think this is going to be a really, really good show, Mobster. So let's hit this hard, and let's start off with discussing recomp. So I'm going to bring in Mobster right off the bat. Mobster, tell us a little bit about your definition of recomping, and give us some ideas about that.
Yeah, we could talk. We could probably do a whole show just discussing the idea, the concept, the reality, etc. of recomposition. So I'm going to go with the fantastical version, Steve, and then I'm going to talk about the reality, right? So the fantastical version, the miracle version, the kind of stuff that people that are new to the sport, new to training, like to think is possible. And it's almost come a sort of like a meme or a joke that, they've been training for 5 days. I haven't had any muscle, but I can see abs, right? So the fantastical version is something like your 20% body fat, you've got 12-inch arms, and you imagine that you go to the gym and I'm going to do diet and I'm going to do cardio and I'm going to do PEDs and my chest is going to grow 4 inches. I'm going to drop 20% body fat. My abs are going to pop in. It's going to be like a miracle transformation. It's going to be like something like those adverts that you and I used to see certain supplement companies come up with. Something like, how Steve Rogers transforms from the skinny runt in Captain America into a muscular freak using serum, not steroids, and so on and so forth. That's the fantastical version. Now, for a very small percentage, and especially if you've been away from training and come back and you have muscle memory to rely on, and for those of you with absolutely amazing genetics, which is really like maybe 1, maybe 5% of you, that might be possible. We've actually seen Mr. Americas, Mr. Worlds, Mr. Olympias, contenders in that kind of ilk, the genetic freaks, take time off of training, Steve, look almost normal, kind of athletic, and then they come back to training, they go back on PEDs, and oh my God, their little belly was sticking out, they had kind of arms, but not really, and then they've transformed into a fucking monster. That's the fantastical version. Now, the reality version is thus, right? If you was, for argument's sake, 15% body fat, and Steve and I have created a program for you, both with PEDs and a good diet and with cardio, and you added 5 pounds of muscle. This is without losing any fat at all, Steve. Then actually your ratio of muscle to fat changes. It doesn't change by a huge amount, but it changes. So arguably, you recomposition, your actual body fat weighed on the scales is exactly the same. But because you've added more muscle, the percentage goes down. What you really want, of course, and again, it's hard, and it is hard, and we're going to get into that if we've got time with regards to training and cardio, is to add muscle and or lose fat at the same time. Now, I could, Steve, if I had never used creatine before, I can literally take creatine, put on 5, 6, 7 pounds in a week, 2 weeks, and it's all in the muscle cells, and my muscles have got bigger, my muscles have got heavier, but the body fat's the same, and I've arguably recomposition. But what we're really looking at here is an increase in muscle circumferences, chest, arms, delts, legs, quads, everything except the abs, and a lowering of body fat. Now, the miracle version, the fantastical version is very, very hard. But we can, and we have seen in normal Joes on our forums some amazing transformations. They're not turning into Mr. Olympia, but what they are doing is bringing down their waist so immediately they look great. And that's just by us creating the diet and cardio and getting them to practice vacuums and then focusing on certain muscle groups like the chest and the shoulders and broadening that back out, and they look amazing. And if the abs start to come through, that's the kind of transformation. It's realistic. It's what we would do as coaches if we had clients, etc., etc. It's actually an amazing result, really. And so that for me is recomposition. There's the idea of it, which we've seen in adverts, we've seen promoted in magazines, and then so on. And then there's the reality. But the reality is actually, Steve, really fantastic. Honestly, guys, the idea that you could bring your waist down, let's say for argument, Steve, 2 inches and add a quarter of an inch to your shoulders, a quarter of an inch to your chest, a quarter of an inch to your arms, and actually have abs start to come through is fantastic. It's not 3 inches on your chest. It's not 2 inches on your arms, which would be amazing. It's not bringing your waist down 6 inches, but you have recomposition. And what we're talking about today is the training, the cardio, the conditioning, the practice and the poses, etc. But specifically and obviously using Geneza products to enable this transformation to happen. Honestly, guys. So things like taking photographs under the same light, with the same clothing, the same background. And we have seen the difference this has made to some people. We've literally just this week, Steve, seen logs where people have added 6 or 7 pounds of muscle on a cycle where their waist has gone down. And honestly, one of them couldn't even see that he made a change. And the rest of us, and I'm quite a harsh critic, Steve, I literally could see that the fellow had done something and had improved. And it was only a very short period of time, in his case, a couple of weeks. But the rest of us, yourself included, if you remember the log I'm thinking of, he'd actually done better than he thought he had. He couldn't see it. All the rest of us could see it. So that's it. It's a reality, guys. I want to put that out there. But we're going to give you the best advice we can today. Try to inspire you, try to motivate you. And let's be honest, guys, it's sort of spring recomposition we're talking about here. So we're getting you ready for the beach. We're getting you ready for summer. What do you think of recomposition from your point, Steve?
It's the hardest thing to do in bodybuilding. A lot of people, let's say you were in really, really good shape, the best shape of your life. All right. Yep. And then you completely just quit the gym. Shit happened. Maybe you got a divorce. You have to go to court. Something happened, right?
Yep. Stress.
Or sickness or pandemic or anything where you had to stop everything or your gym closed down. How many times have we seen that? You just show up to your gym, there's a note on it. Oh, the gym is now closed. And you're like, oh shit, out of nowhere. So stuff like that happens and you just like, you stop or you just go back to eating shitty or you go back to an addiction you had and then you lose everything. You lose the muscle, your strength, and then you put on a bunch of fat. So then you're like, well, one day you wake up, you're like, fuck, I'm going to get back into shape today. So then you go back to what you were doing before the wheels came off and you're able to quickly lose the body fat and gain the muscle and gain the strength back. That's called muscle and body memory. So that is basically what pro athletes do in all these sports ahead of their seasons. Because in the off season, they'll take a break, they'll take a vacation, they'll spend more time with their family. They won't work out as much. And a lot of them, especially the older guys, they've learned to do that to conserve their body. Then ahead of the season, they'll really get themselves into top shape for the season. So it's a big cycle. So it's easier for you to recomp when you've already been there. But if you've never been there, if you're listening to this and you're in your 30s and 40s and you've never had that body that you strive for and you're trying to do it, it's probably not going to happen naturally. You definitely need to use anabolic steroids because anabolic steroids, they break down barriers. They also allow you to cut more body fat and prevent muscle wasting in the process. And catabolism, which I hate using that term, because it gets pushed a lot out there by people who use it incorrectly. But the point is that I'm trying to make is that recomping is hard, okay? Unless you have the body memory to tap into, it is hard, and it gets harder as you get older. So these anabolic steroids from Geneza Pharma, they will help you get there because they break down the barriers. An example of how they break down the barriers, they increase protein synthesis. They drop SHBG. And a lot of the steroids we're going to talk about today, Mobster, are great at binding to sex hormone binding globulin, which is a something that's in our body. It's a hormone that's in our body that blocks our ability to make excellent muscle and strength gains. And a lot of things happen in our bodies too. Our bodies want to store fat. It's a survival mechanism. So a lot of these anabolic steroids, they boost our metabolism unnaturally to basically help us drop body fat a lot easier than we would without them. So that's the magic of these anabolic steroids, but you got to use them right, and you got to have everything else in line. So we're going to talk about that when on the next couple segments. Go ahead, Mobster. Yeah, you're on mute still.
Sorry, I want to emphasize the point that Steve just made. And when you decide to do this, guys, I want this almost to be like your mantra. So in order for you to get the absolute best out of the advice we're going to give you today, I want you to be laser focused. And laser focus is relatively easy if you say, I'm going to do this stuff now for the next 8 weeks, next 100 days, 9, 10 weeks, 11 weeks, 12 weeks. I want you to have it in your minds like a war. And for you to prepare for war, I'm going to have you doing all the kind of stuff that soldiers would do. I'm going to get you up early. I'm going to have you making sure you get your steps in. I'm going to have you making sure that you're meal prepping. I'm going to have you making sure that you know precisely what your PD plan is for Geneza products. And that would be the thing. I want it to be like a mantra. Almost, guys, I want you to go out and get a kind of temporary tattoo on your foreheads in reverse, Steve. So every time you look in the mirror, it says, be focused, be focused, be focused. This is something you should be kind of doing all the time. But if you want to recomp, if you want to make it happen, you need to have that kind of war cry, focus, laser kind of vibe going on. Absolutely every single day, from the time you get up to the time you go to bed, and ensuring that you get your sleep, must be completely and utterly dedicated outside of your work, outside of your family relationship stuff. Everything else must be, I'm going to be obsessed. I'm going to be focused on this one thing for the next 100 days. And trust me, if you only did 2 photographs, one at the beginning and one at the end, you would see that the 100 days was absolutely worth it. So when Steve says it's hard work, I'm nodding, 100% nodding. But it's not impossible. And the transformation that you'll make will be, even to your own eyes, you should be able to see it. But it's especially, like I said, with the example I gave earlier, something that should be obvious to other people. When they see you walking around with cheekbones, when you had a little bit of a jowl thing going on, when they see that you've had to change the belt notches, when that shirt that you wear all the time to change your uniform for work, whatever's changed, people are going to go, oh, wow. And I'll tell you something else, Steve, as well, right? You will prove to yourself, but especially to other people, that transformations, recompositions are possible. And it will blow your mind, even without you maybe realizing when it's happening, how many other people are going to come to you or look at you in a particular way and be, give me some advice. What the fuck have you been doing, guy? How the hell did, man, you changed your waist? I can't believe it. Where's that 6-pack come from? Where's those caps looking shoulders come from? Something that's going to happen as well, Stephen. It's one of those things that's a bit of a mindfuck because we don't always see this for ourselves. But it'd be one of those things that maybe you can't see when you're dressed in your training clothes, at work, doing whatever, at school. But one of those things that people are going, what the fuck, when you take your shirt off. So yeah, guys, you need to be 100% focused, 100% dedicated to this. And even if it's only a few inches here and a few inches there and 6, 7, 8 pounds of muscle tissue, whatever, it will blow your mind when you start to get this feedback from other people, the effect that you're having on them. People down the gym that you go to are being motivated. They'll see that you're on a journey. People at work will start to see that your face has changed, your neck is not bulging out, this kind of stuff. So, Dave, let's get into that. I think the big thing for me today, and we talk about this on every show that we do like this, is that you absolutely want a source that you can trust. You want a bunch of products from a company, from a source, from a brand like Geneza, where you know that the feedback is on point. You know that the product is absolutely sound. None of us, and Steve and I have both had this experience. The idea that we're going to do any kind of training or PD program, and we've wasted, I certainly have wasted, and I think Steve talked about this on another show, 2 weeks in Steve's case, and I think it was something like 10 or 11 days in my case, when on a product that absolutely was not what it said on the tin, did nothing in my case. And I think Steve realized he wasn't taking what he thought he was taking. So absolutely, we've had the experience of using products, using a brand that was not what we thought it was, and did nothing to help the training and the program and everything else that we were putting in, and all the fucking hard work that we've invested. So, Steve, talk about from your perspective, and I'll talk about it as well, why we like GP, why we like Geneza Pharma.
Look, Mobster and I have been around a long time. Mobster's a different situation, lives in a completely different country, but we both have experienced this in our past where we've run cycles, we've invested time, sweat, money. Okay, Mobster and I were both working guys. I mean, we don't come from wealth. Everyone thinks people from Britain are all rich and live in castles and stuff, but Mobster is a working class guy, just like I am.
Blue collar.
And, I'm the son of immigrants, what I'm saying? My parents came to this country with $5 in their pocket. So we're not rich. So I work hard for my money. I don't want to go and spend hundreds of dollars on a cycle and then halfway through or toward the end of the cycle realize, man, I was running fake crap. So number one, when it comes to anabolic steroids, you got to make sure you're using legit products. And that's why Geneza Pharma is one that I love to use. Because when I use Geneza Pharma, I know that I'm using legit gear. I know that I'm investing. It's an investment to me. It's an investment in my body. Okay. That's money that I worked hard for. Okay. It wasn't given to me. I worked hard for that money. I want to make sure I'm investing in the right place. It's just like buying a car or even buying a lawnmower. It's a huge investment. You buy a lawnmower, you go and spend $400 or $500 on a nice lawnmower, and 6 months later, the damn thing dies in the middle of summer when you got to cut the grass and the grass is four inches high, and you're sweating bullets outside, and you're trying to get your lawnmower to work and it won't turn on. That shit pisses me off. I've been through that a ton of times myself. And you guys know what I'm talking about out there. You've been through that. And it pisses me off. Or you buy a car, you work so hard to get a car, and the car won't start after a year or two because it's a piece of junk and they sold you a lemon. So listen, at the end of the day, we want to invest our money the right way. This is an investment. So I know when I'm buying Geneza Pharma, if I'm going to spend $500 or $1,000 on a cycle, that's a lot of money to me. And I know when I buy those products with Geneza Pharma, I know I'm getting my investment's worth. I know I'm making a smart investment because I know not only am I getting the correct dosage and I'm getting the right steroids too, because a lot of times these sources out there, they don't care. They don't check their batches. They don't care. They just sell whatever. They might sell Anavar, which is really debol, but they don't care. They just want to make money off of you. And they're like, well, hopefully my customer doesn't realize that I'm selling them Debol and not Anavar, or T-Bol or Winstrol instead of Anavar, because Anavar is an expensive steroid. Same thing with Primo. We're going to talk about Primo later in this show because it's a great steroid for recomping. I've been a victim of using fake Primo. That shit pissed me off because Primo, especially back in those days, was expensive, okay? And you had to buy Primo from overseas, okay? And I spent probably over $1,200 on that Primo cycle. And what a disappointment to find out that you bought fake Primo. And that's what happened to me. And I spent $1,200. That made me very angry. So I'm working out in the gym. I can remember leg days doing in squats. I had a bad day at work. I'm doing and I'm like, man, shit's not working, man. What's going on here? So then the next cycle, I use a different brand with Primo, and boom, I had results. So you see the difference of using high quality versus low quality. Don't try to nickel and dime your way and try to save 10 or 20 bucks, okay, by using a cheaper source or using your gym dealer when you can use Geneza Pharma, which is fairly priced products. It's not the cheapest, but it's fairly priced, but you know you're getting what you ordered. That to me is important, Mom. So that's the number one thing when we make this sort of investment is
Absolutely.
We want to make sure that we're getting what we ordered, and we're getting what we ordered and it's dosed. If I want to run 500 milligrams of Primo or 300 milligrams of Tren or 200 milligrams of testosterone. I want to make sure that that's accurate, that it's
Yes.
not overdosed and it's not underdosed. It needs to be around 99% or 100% or sometimes 101%. We've seen those in these batches when they've tested them. It's around the 99 to 100% area. That's where it needs to be. You can't use gear that's overdosed either, because that can get you into trouble. If you use overdosed testosterone, we've seen this from guys, you'll end up with gyno because you thought you were using 200 milligrams or 150 milligrams, but you're really using 300 to 350. Now you end up with gyno because you weren't running an AI. You didn't think you needed an AI. So you see, it can hurt you both ways, overdose or underdose. Geneza Pharma is dosed properly, and it's dosed. You're getting what you ordered. That to me is very important. Go ahead, Mobster.
Yeah, look, guys, and I say this on other shows, but I think it bears repeating. So we have approved sources, and Geneza Pharma is absolutely an approved source. And we say, what makes Geneza Pharma a trusted brand? What makes an approved source? Now, Steve's covered quite properly that you are getting the accurate amount. How many times? And I'm not saying I'm a fucker for this, Steve, or guys are upping the amount that they're taking middle of the cycle. That's okay to do it on the fly. But what if the fact was they wasn't getting the dosage that they thought they was? Now, there's another thing which is kind of we've talked about in recent shows where we said products get tested. We've seen certificates of analysis. We know that products are randomly taken from the product line, sent off to the lab. Then that can happen in-house, and it should. And I like the fact that on certain sites that we talk about, you can see certificates of analysis. And I even like the fact, Steve, sometimes they're a couple of % off because they're showing you that they're a couple of % off. They're not pretending it was dead on or whatever else. They're being open and honest. So here's the thing, and this is the thing that we've most recently discussed, Steve, is that there's one or two individuals, members of our forums, where they have taken products from all of our approved sources, test from here, a Tren from there, and an Anavar from here, and so on and so forth. And they've paid out of their own goddamn pocket, which is a considerable expense when you're talking about multiple products from different brands, and sent those products off to be tested. So not only have you got the in-house testing, where they are using an independent lab with products taken from the line, plus whatever they actually do in their own labs, but you've also got an independent user, buyer, anonymously buying the product, sending it off themselves at their own expense, which again, as I said, we see hundreds of dollars across the various samples and products that they're choosing. And then they've had these products tested. And as Steve said, I think earlier on, pretty much all of them were 95, 96, 97, 98%. In other words, they were pretty damn close, if not on point, as opposed to, as Steve's inferred earlier, and absolutely, I've had product with nothing in, and I've had product, like Steve said, where we're not sure if it is what it said on the label, if it was the right dosage, had it had someone else, like something else in, like Steve was talking about, and whatever else. Every single one of those approved sources, which included Geneza Pharma, was within the parameters that we wanted to see. Now, you've also got small things, and this is exactly the same reason why you can give something in the real world out there in the shops and car dealerships and whatever else a certain added value, and it's how the product looks, clean, labels, properly stamped, embossed, etc. on the boxes, the way the stuff that's in date, they're not sending you short dated products, and so on and so forth. And this is how you build up a reputation, whether it's buying directly or whether it's buying it through a reseller and so on. And here's the thing again, right? And I'll touch on this just before I finish on this subject. So in order for you to build up a reputation over multiple years, tens of years sometimes, with some of the brands, and I'm including again Geneza here, you do that by being the way that we want you to be all the fucking time. Not for a year. I've seen labs come and go in a year. Less. Not for 2 or 3 years. That happens. Not with big name brands that Steve and I know from back in the day that don't exist anymore. Or if they do exist, there's 3 different companies using the same name and so on. No, you build up your reputation by being a solid product, close to the numbers, if not dead on, with almost 0 to none, because that's pretty much how it is now, Steve, whether it comes to infections and issues that people have with certain products, by not using cheap oils, by not mixing products up, by not using the completely wrong ingredient in your product, and so on and so forth. And you do that for tens of years. And the feedback becomes slow and steady. I'll use this analogy that actually kind of applies to any product brought anywhere. And it works along the lines of the rule is something like the number of people that will tell you that a product out of, say, 10, it might be one, it might be two, you might even get real lucky if it's free. But when a product is crap, 7 motherfuckers will put their hands up and tell you it's crap. You can do your own research in this regard. You can go online and you can look not just on our family of forums, but any forum that you can mention and find out for yourself the reputation that Geneza enjoys. And they enjoy it because they're putting in hard work every day for years and years at a time to build up their reputation, to build up their brand, to get themselves to be known, for resellers to take on their products, and for those products to go all over the world and add tons of muscle and drop tons of body fat and get hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of people into the best shape of their goddamn life. What do you think on that, Steve?
Yeah, that's definitely the purpose of using these anabolic steroids. And I'll tell you, the best one for that, Mobster, as we transition into our next topic is Tren.
Yeah.
Tren.
And Tren.
All right.
It's not even my favorite. Steve, it's not even my favorite. And yet, what Steve just said, it's just, I even said this in the pre-show to Steve. The first and pretty much foremost for recomposition, and I know Steve's going to cover this as well, the number one steroid for recomposition is Tren. I hate it, but I love it because it's exactly how it worked for me. Tell him the story, Steve, because I know you got one as well.
So if you go to a bodybuilding competition and let's say everyone had to take a truth serum and actually say what steroid they were using, whether you're a physique competitor, open comp competitor, whatever, any of the male categories, okay? They would ask you, what are you using? And I guarantee you, most all of them would be on Tren. And if they weren't on Tren, they were not going to be in good shape versus their competition. So that's pretty much Tren. Now, why does Tren work so well? And, let's talk about Geneza Pharma Tren. Why is it so important? So Tren does a lot of things. I've seen guys on the forum that I never recommend doing this, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the last segment about tips and tricks, but I never recommend you eat crap, okay? Whether it's on steroids or not on steroids. But I've seen people literally eat shit on Tren, and there's been professional bodybuilders who have actually talked about this as well, that they've eaten McDonald's and Big Macs and they've eaten a lot of crap while on Tren, and they still were able to shred down and still able to build muscle. So Tren is a different animal, but I don't recommend you do that, obviously. Obviously, if you eat good on Tren, you'll have even better results than you would otherwise. But the key with Tren is the way it turbocharges your metabolism. It's almost like lighting a fire inside your body. You burn so many calories on Tren, just doing your, even if you don't work out the whole day or do any cardio or nothing, just sitting on your couch all day watching football, you're still going to burn more calories than you would otherwise. So that's one of the reasons it's so good for recomp. And of course, it's so damn androgenic and anabolic, on paper 5 times more than straight testosterone. And look, the reality is those ratios, they don't necessarily translate to real life, but in this case, they do. So Tren is a beast of an anabolic steroid, and a lot of people out there who use Tren, they hit personal records, whether it be how they look in the mirror, whether it be with strength, whether it be with muscle, whatever. So it's more than capable of being a great steroid for recomp, and that's what it boils down to. But it's not for new people. So I'll let you in, Mobster, talk a little bit more about Tren. I'm going to get into the 4 different main Tren options that Geneza Pharma has. But again, it's not for new people. You have to gain some experience before using Tren.
Right. So I'm going to ask Steve a question, and then I'll definitely dive deep into what Tren does for people. Steve, the phrase you've used in the past is, I think, is it nutrient partitioning? Literally the way that Tren affects the food that's going in and almost seems to sort of make it work better. Explain that briefly before I get into the depths.
So I've talked to some experts on this over the years, and they've kind of explained it like this, that just imagine using, IGF-1 and insulin and these nutrient partitioning compounds that professionals at the highest level use. That's basically what Tren does. So it basically turns your muscles into a sponge. So you'll notice on Tren that if you don't eat carbs, you start getting the shakes. You know, your muscles are basically begging to be fed protein and carbs. If you're not getting consistent protein and carbs on Tren, that's what's going to end up happening. You'll end up increasing your side effects. You'll end up getting night sweats. You'll end up getting the shakes. You'll end up getting those hypoglycemic symptoms. And that's really the reason for that. So it really is kind of amazing the way it messes with your thyroid, the way it messes with the neurotransmitters in your brain, the way it fires them off, the dopamine and all that stuff, the prolactin, the dopamine, and all that stuff. So it really is a different animal than other anabolic steroids because it does that. Now, other anabolic steroids, they do all that too, but to a much lesser extent than Tren does. So Tren is basically milligram, but I mean, just running 500 milligrams of Tren would be an insane dose, compared to equipoise or Primo or any of these other steroids I'm going to talk about. So Tren, you definitely want to stick to a dose somewhere between 150 milligrams a week up to 350 milligrams or 400 milligrams a week, unless you're a professional who's really experienced. Some professionals will run it higher than that. And some of these guys who end up with strokes in their 50s are the guys running over a gram of Tren a week. So you just want to be careful with Tren. It's extremely inflammatory in the body. PGF2A, it's a prostaglandin effect that we have in our body, and that's what Tren will do for you. So it's very, very inflammatory. You'll notice your kidneys, liver, heart, brain, all your organs in your body will get extremely strained on Tren. But it's a hell of a steroid for Recomp. It is a hell of a steroid. Really quick, Mobster, and then let's get into the GP options with Tren.
Yeah, look, guys, I did a cut stack, let me think, probably 3-4 months ago now, Steve, maybe a little bit longer. And that was a different company's product that included a small amount of Tren as part of the cut stack. And quite simply, I recompositioned. I went down, and I've described this before, 2 inches on my waist, I think 2 holes on my belt, should I say more accurately. I started at a certain body weight. I went down, I think 6 or 7 pounds, and by the end, it was only a 4-week process. I was back up to the same body weight with the waist down. And the only issue that I had, well, there's 2 issues really. One was I felt toxic, because I've never used Tren before. So literally, I think Steve and I have talked about it before. Tren is one of the few, when you're just sitting there, steroids, and you can feel it having an effect, literally just walking around doing your normal non-gym, non-cardio shit, and you feel like you're on. And so that's slightly toxic sensation. But in terms of recomposition, by the end, and this was, again, just 4 weeks, I was back up to my starting body weight with a smaller waist, looking leaner, and absolutely, what does that mean? It means I dropped body fat, I dropped waist size, and I added muscle tissue. So that is exactly what we talked about at the beginning of this show, pure recomposition. Tren has its fans. Tren has people out there that absolutely every single cycle must include Tren. And arguably that would very much be the case with pros. And I've used this phrase on other shows when we've talked about Tren, when we said they will use comments like Tren is gold, Tren is God, etc., because there's almost for them a need to feel like when you're on. It's definitely hitting, as Steve said, the neurotransmitters in the brain. In fact, it's probably one of 2 steroids that have been specifically tested for and studied for that exact reaction, not necessarily in athletes or bodybuilders, and so on. So listen, I use this analogy as well, Steve, just before we move on, and that is, it is like using the best kind of fuel, the kind that you would use in a Ferrari in a normal car. Realistically, your car that can do 110 miles an hour is not suddenly going to go 200 miles an hour, but it's definitely going to run better. It's definitely going to feel like it's faster. The acceleration is better, and so on and so forth. So it might not necessarily be the best thing for the engine overhaul. You might need to look at the engine after you've been running this rocket fuel. And so we're going to talk about, as best we possibly can, with the dosages that we're talking about, with a solid brand like Geneza, how to use it effectively to avoid some of the side effects, but absolutely with this and other products to get the best results possible from your cycle. So like you said, Steve, let's move on to what we want now.
So GP, first of all, they have the Tren Ace 100. It comes in 100 milligram milliliter per ml. So it's a really, really good option. It's a shorter ester, gives you more flexibility to run a shorter cycle. It hits you like a ton of bricks quick. And also, once you stop using it, because on Tren, the longer you use Tren, the more annoying the side effects get. I talked about the side effects earlier. So if you want the side effects out of your system quicker and you don't mind injecting a little more often a week, then you can go with the Tren Ace. They also have the GP Tren 200E enanthate. It's got an enanthate ester. It still hits you like a ton of bricks. I've never run Tren, any type of Tren, and not have it hit you like a ton of bricks. Around week 2, hits you like a ton of bricks, but it's going to be in your system a little longer. You get sick of using it, it's going to be in your system a little longer, take a little longer to get out of your system. Take a few weeks to be out of your system on that one. They also have the GP Tritren. Now it's a 150 milligram milliliter. It comes with 50 milligrams of the ACE, 50 milligrams of the E, and 50 milligrams of the hex. So this one would be perfect for those of you out there who are incapable of making a decision, and there's people out there like that. I get it. It annoys the shit out of me, people who are like that. But if you can't decide, you're like, I don't know if I should run Ace or E. I can't figure it out. Okay, then run the Tritren. So it's there for you. And exactly, and they have it at 150, so it's right in between the 100 and 200 milligram milliliter too. So really, if you can't figure it out, run the Tritren. And then the GP Andromix is going to be a mix of 3 different steroids. It's going to be the Masteron short ester, testosterone propionate short ester, and it's going to be the Tren Ace. So it's a great recomp, Mobster. I'm going to tell you, it's a great recomp on that one. And they're each 50 milligrams. I think I mentioned that. And the nice thing about this is that Masteron, by adding the Masteron, you kind of add that hardening effect. Not kind of, you add that hardening effect that you would get from Masteron. So that really, really good for those of you who like to stand in front of the mirror and flex and see the hardness to your muscles. The Masteron will be perfect for this. And this is a good mix. A lot of people like, if you react good to testosterone when it comes to recomp, then that's also a good option for you too. So if you're a good responder to test, good responder to Masteron, you could just get the blend, and it's exactly the same, 50 milligrams of each. So you get 150 milligrams per ml. So you can kind of do the math on that. If you were to run 300 milligrams, so take 2 cc's, you'd be getting 100 of the test probe, 100 of the Tren Ace, and 100 of the mass propionate, and you could do that 3 times a week. So you'd end up getting 300 milligrams of each overall. So that would be an option for you. Go ahead, Mobster.
Yeah, there's two thoughts here before we move on to any other choices, Steve. One would be for those of you that never used Tren before and you want to find out if it's as wonderful as we're saying it is in terms of recomposition effects, but you also want to be careful with regards to those reputation for side effects, then the recommendation, and I've given this advice, would be to use the ACE initially, purely and simply because it's a shorter ester. And quite simply, as we put it, quicker in and quicker out. Meaning, if there are any side effects, if you're not going to be using Tren, if you don't like the Tren effects, then this product's not going to be in your system that long. Whereas if you have had experience and you can manage the side effects, and we're going to talk about that as well, then I would definitely go for the enanthate. In fact, my choice is, Steve, purely and simply because I've talked about cutting mixes. GP Andromix is actually described as a cutting mix, and that would be for me the perfect choice because the dosages are not too high. Even the acetate is still 50 milligrams, as Steve said already. And I've got a familiarity with a similar product, so I know how my body responds. And the Masteron for me would be, as especially the case here, the idea that you're going to give that polish to your body, and especially if you get the body fat down sufficiently to see the muscles popping, for the abs to be visible, you will get that marvelous little bit of a polish. The hardening thing is more of a physical thing, Steve, touching it with your finger, but it's actually kind of visible. So yeah, talk about the TMX 400, Steve, before we move on.
Now, some of you react really good to testosterone, and I would say it's a minority, but it's a good percentage minority. And I've had people on the forum argue this. all the time. They're like, man, you know, I love testosterone. I recomp on testosterone. A lot of people don't. I don't on testosterone. I don't think Mobster does either. And a lot of you won't. And competitors at the highest levels, most all of them will actually come off testosterone leading up to the competition. But look, you guys aren't competing. A lot of you, you're not doing this to win a trophy. You're doing this for yourself. And a lot of you react really well to testosterone. You just like the way it is in the body. If you're one of those people, you can, instead of using the Andromix, Geneza Pharma came up with something called the TMX 400. Now, each milliliter is 400 milligrams instead of the 150. So again, it's less injecting and it's less frequency of injecting. That's the first positive. The other positive is it's got 200 milligrams out of that 400, which is test E. So if you like testosterone, you're covered. And in 100 milligrams is masteron E, listed as drostanolone, and then the Tren E, which is another 100 milligrams. So it's twice as much testosterone as each the masteron and Tren, but combining the Tren and masteron, it's the same amount, 200 milligrams, if that makes sense. So this one, you can inject it once or twice a week at a high, you know, you can inject it once or twice a week. So less often injecting, but you're getting a lot more in your system because each milliliter is 400 milliliters. So Geneza Pharma has you covered for those of you who like more a heavier testosterone option. But generally, you're going to notice if you run testosterone, you're going to get aromatization into estrogen and it's going to bloat you. So we're generally not going to want to use something that has testosterone in it when you're doing a recomp for that reason. So let's get into some cutting. You want to touch on that? We'll get into some cutting steroids. Go ahead, Mobster.
Yeah, so one of the things that Steve and I talked about in the pre-show, and I've made a note of this on my pad as just before the show started, and I've underlined it, Steve, and you and I have touched on it in our show notes, which is no bulkers. So basically, what do we mean by that? We're not going to suggest any product that bulks you up. It doesn't matter how great your diet is and how good your cardio is. If the product that we're going to suggest increases water retention or blows you up real quick, there are some out there that will be affected by certain PEDs in certain particular ways. So we're generalizing when we come up with these comments and ideas and suggestions. But nevertheless, we're not talking about Debo. We're not talking about any kind of. I love Sustain Deca, but that combination's always been a bulker for me. And realistically, we want you to look lean. We want you to look polished. So anything that makes you hold water would be a bad idea, even with GP sells products for aromatase inhibitors, even with you controlling the water. Why give yourself more work to do, Steve? So, for example, and I'm going to say this again, no bulking drugs. All of the product choices we're going to give you today are essentially lean mass gainers, lean or hard tissue gainers versus anything that's going to add water to you, just as I said, because we've done to give you more work to do, more stress on the body. And so absolutely we won't be choosing anything like that. So for example, Steve, I'm looking right now at the GB Boulderone at 300 milligrams. That would be a great choice. Give some choices of your own, Steve, and I'll come in with some comments as you go along.
So let's go through some orals. We've got GP T-Bowl 25. So each tablet is 25 milligram milliliter. So T-Ball's a really good one. If you want low side effects, you don't want crazy results, you just want something that you can incorporate into your fasting protocols and into your cardio. And T-Ball will work good. It's not going to mess with your appetite like some other steroids will. It's also very weak. It's not going to give you crazy results. But look, at the end of the day, it's a very, very good option for that purpose. Now, Winstrol, GP Winstrol 50 is 50 milligrams per tab. And they also have a GP Stand 50. Now, the Winstrol Tab 50 are tablets. The GP Stand 50 is injectable, or you can drink it. With Winstrol, you can always drink it. You don't have to necessarily inject it because the injections are kind of a pain in the ass a lot of times. So that would be a good option. And then you have, of course, the GP Anavar 50. And I know Mobster's a big fan of this one, even though he's not doing very much recomping over his life. He's mostly a strength trainer. But look, Anavar, kind of like T-Bowl, but it's more expensive and it's better. All around better, except when it comes to cardio, and I'll explain it why really quick. Very, very simple. Because Anavar gives you the lower back pumps. And
Yes.
it's amazing with these steroids. Certain steroids give you pumps in certain places. Most of you who use Anavar are going to complain about the lower back pumps. But here's the thing. If you're doing like running, you're doing high intensity, high impact, not high intensity, but high impact cardio, that can
Yes.
be a problem. So if you do low impact cardio, like a Pilates or a yoga or something like that, where you're staying in the same spot, you're not out there running on a hard surface and really pounding away at your joints, then you could probably get away with Anavar. So it really depends on how you react to these steroids. But Anavar has some good fat burning properties. A lot of people have gotten really good results and fat loss from using Anavar. So I have a lot of respect for Anavar for a recomper. A lot of people have had success with Anavar. Mobster, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, guys, we know, for example, because we've recommended it already, that Tren, it can absolutely murder on your cardio. So my choice is, Steve, if I was going to combine an oral with any of the Tren choices, would probably be T-Bolt. You don't gain a lot of muscle at T-Bolt, but it actually is specifically created to enable athletes in certain athletic competition to still be able to have some athletic ability above and beyond throwing the javelin or putting a shot or whatever else, which is what it was developed for, with the athletes in mind, specifically East German athletes. And it didn't ruin their cardio. Whereas, as Steve said, Anavar would kill you on the pumps. And I say kill you metaphorically, would give you a pumps. Mine was always shin pumps, Steve. I absolutely love it for power and for lean muscle tissue gains. But if I was talking about combining this with Tren, T-Bolt would absolutely be my choice here. You're not both of those, Anavar and T-Bolt, don't put huge, great lumps of muscle on you. The Tren's going to do that anyway. I've always found with regards to Anavar that I would add about 5 pounds of tissue on, but it increased my strength, which is what I was using for. But because of the Tren's effect on your cardio, T-Bolt would be the choice, just to negate some of the side effects and give you some cardiovascular ability, which you're going to need. There's also things around the timing, the dosage, and so on and so forth. And this is the sort of stuff that we give you in the tips and tweaks and things like that. An obvious example, Steve, would be to keep the dosages manageable on both products. So that if you up the Tren and it starts to get into 400 and 500 milligrams per week level or more, the side effects are going to just be felt that much more, and it's just going to make that much harder to do cardio. When I was doing what I was doing before, Steve, I would double up, or should I say, I'd half as much again on my daily steps, and it was tiring, but it got done. I'd hate to have to go running or do any kind of middle distance work, which I know that you like on Tren. So anything that's going to keep my cardio there would be absolutely great. Like Steve said already, I'm going to echo some of his thoughts and sentiments on the orals. Winstrol, yes. To lesser degree, I know it affects some people one way versus another. I don't know necessarily that I'd want to put this in if I was using Tren, but there are other choices. Anadrol is supposed to be a lean muscle gainer, but for sometimes for newbies, and I wouldn't really a newbie to be using Tren, of course. I don't know that I'd want Anadrol for a newbie. A little bit of experience. And again, all of these are dose dependent, Steve. Let me have a quick look at what they also have got. Some Proviron, as you said already. Yeah, those would be my choices from the orals, and I'll keep it all real simple. Again, because of the side effects of Tren, if the dosage is around what we've suggested already, a low dose oral, 30 to 50 milligrams, probably. I know that the perfect level for me on Anavar has always been 50, but again, if I was using training combination, I'd probably keep that down to 30 milligrams a day. The Winstrol I'd probably keep at the normal levels, and the Turinabol 20, maybe 30 milligrams a day, again on the Tren, but that's as much to help me with the cardiovascular as anything else. Let's talk about some other injectable choices. Now, for me, and I've said this before, Steve knows, I don't know why, I really don't. And I know it's probably just one of those individual things, but I've never really got that much personally out of using any of the variants, but specifically testosterone in Amphate. I don't know why that is. I know that buddies of mine have used it. We've used the same source, the same product, and they absolutely loved it. It's just something that didn't suit me, or perhaps what I was aiming for at the time, and therefore the results for me were meh. neither bad nor good, not noticeable, yet my buddies were going absolutely crazy over it. So it might be something for you that specifically you've got experience of. And I would hope that you would have experience in this regards, because Tren shouldn't be your first choice, as we said already. So yeah, if you've got experience with testosterone, all its forms, cypionate, prop, enanthate, etc., and you know what it does for you, would you, for example, Steve, combine any form of testosterone? And I don't think of a test space, because you and I don't have a great deal of we really, neither one of us think a test space is required. And especially if I was using Tren, for example, the numbers that Steve quoted earlier on, I would stick to around 300 milligrams a week. If I was going to use any kind of testosterone, but let's say enanthate, because I know it does work for other people, 200, maybe 300 milligrams again. What about you for testosterone, Steve, before we look at other injectable choices?
Yeah, and I touched on it earlier. If you're running too much testosterone, it's going to aromatize into estrogen. So if you want to use testosterone at higher dosing and you want to, you're okay with it, you react well to it when it comes to recomping, it's an option, but it's really going to be necessary for you to use an aromatase inhibitor, AI. Geneza Pharma has you covered on that. They have Aromacin, they have Arimidex. Those are really good options. Aromacin would be my first choice when it comes to an AI. Now, when it comes to stacking, Masteron, the GP Mass 100, the GP Mass 200. Both of them are an option in any recomp cycle. Now, with Masteron, it's a hardener. And I talked about Masteron a little earlier when it came to the mixes. When it comes to Tren, it mixes really well with Tren, just like peanut butter and jelly. It's a very good mix. In this case, you can just use the Masteron with something else to your choosing. And it's really, really good for vascularity and hardening and those types of effects. It comes to GP Prima 100. Primo is a really, really good one. And Primobolan is one of those steroids like T-Bol. It's not going to mess with you. Okay. It's not going to cause these side effects like Tren will. It's not going to throw your appetite off and all this stuff. So with Primo, a lot of people, they'll like to use a Primo cycle. It's a smooth cycle. They like to eat in a deficit. They like to do cardio on it. And they like to just focus on holding or gaining or maintaining their muscle mass and losing body fat. So that would be a way you can recomp, because Primo will help you hold on to that muscle or increase the muscle a little bit, which would be that by definition a recomp, because again, you're gaining a little bit of muscle and you're losing a little bit of body fat on Primo, but it's not going to be a crazy body transformation like Tren. So Primo in this situation, the GP Primo would be an option for those of you who don't want to do a crazy cycle with crazy side effects and crazy transformation. It'd be for you who want to do a nice, gentle recomp. So that's where I would do the Primo in that situation. And then Mobster Clen. Now, Clen is not an anabolic steroids, but I want to mention Clen a little bit. A lot of you out there, you'll use Clen and you're going to absolutely hate it. Okay. I'll raise my hand on that. Absolutely hated Clen. Side effects, not worth it. It murdered my cardio. I did not like it. But there is a small percentage of you out there who are going to react really well to Clen. And there's a lot of pro bodybuilders out there who do use Clen. We have one on our forum, and I've seen his cycles before, and some of his cycles where he won his pro card included Clen. Now, Clen is not a steroid, as I said, but is more of a stimulant. It's going to basically increase your metabolism and help you burn more fat. So it's going to be a struggle to do cardio, but the cardio you do on Clen is going to pay off much more than the cardio doesn't do. But it's a miserable way it's a miserable drug, okay, to use. And with the Clen, it's 40 micrograms with the Geneza Pharma per dose. So I'd recommend no more than 80 or 120 micrograms a day total, and I would not recommend using it for a long period of time because it will cause heart strain. So I'm not a fan of it, but again, it's not about what I'm a fan of. It's
Yeah,
about telling you about these
works. Yeah.
compounds. I do not like Clen. I do not recommend Clen, but some of you are going to use it and some of you are going to get good results from it. So it's good in one of these stacks. Again, I would not use it with Tren for sure, because using it with Tren would be absolutely
Yeah,
rough.
miserable.
You'd be miserable on it. You literally wouldn't be able to hydrate yourself using those two together.
Yeah,
You'd be
yeah.
absolutely miserable and your cardio would go to shit. Okay, so just be careful if you mess with Clen. But it is an option if you want to try it. I've tried it a couple times. I'm all for experimenting. I hate it. I will never run it again. But hey, you might like it. Go ahead, Mobster.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I'll touch on that and then I'll talk about some tips and tricks, etc. So I know from being there when it's happened of ladies coming to my local gym and inquiring about Clen boot roll. Clen boot roll or Clen, sitting on the sofa, you can feel working. Ironically, exactly as we said before with regards to Tren, the problem is for some people, and especially if you've gone into high dosage straight away, it can feel like the symptoms of anxiety. And you need to understand that you're not having an anxiety attack and not stressing out. It's their Clen. That can feel uncomfortable. And of course, it's uncomfortable because it's there all the goddamn time. It's not just there, for 5 minutes in the morning or whatever. It's there for the whole day. You can be distracted by work and your cardio and hitting the gym, but it's there in the background all the time. And that can be uncomfortable for some people. But apps, does it work? Does it do the thing, especially in combination with cardio and a good solid diet? Absolutely, it does. So, like Tren, it has its fans. It's one of those drugs, one of those medications you can feel working while you're using it. But you need to understand and you need to manage that as best you possibly can. Regard management, etc. Very simple technique in this particular regards. I wouldn't want to fast on either of these two, but you could fast. And one of my suggestions right now would be don't wait until you do the cycle, but start your cardio today, pre-cycle, start your nutrition today. Absolutely clean your diet up 100%. Make sure that when you go into these cycles and any of the products that we suggested from Geneza Pharma, that's already clean, it's already sorted. Get rid of the junk in the house. And like I said at the beginning, listen, right? In order for you to recomposition and get your absolute best out of any of the suggestions we're talking about, whether that's getting up 20 minutes early to do your cardio so you've got time as opposed to quote unquote, I don't have the time, or meal prepping so you don't have to think about what's going into your mouth, only healthy stuff's going in. But specifically, like I said, make this for you a 100-day war. Make it so that you are laser focused. You can't half-ass this stuff. If you want true recomposition, even as a genetically average Joe, you need to put the work in 100%. You need to be on point with your cardio. Like Steve said, Tren is an amazing drug, but you will get much better results if you put the absolute maximum possible effort you possibly can into this and look to get the best results. And literally, as we said at the beginning, to transform and to have that sort of appearance that people were going to notice. And like I said, crazy as it might seem, even to inspire individuals around you, people that are going to notice what's happened, and especially for yourself. It's difficult to see this on a day-to-day basis. So one of the tricks, and I've described this already, is take a photograph day one, before the diet, before the cardio, before any of the PEDs, day one. And then 100 days later, cardio's on point, diet's on point, PEDs have been working their magic, and you've been absolutely killing it in the gym, 99, 98, 97, all those single days in between. So you're absolutely doing the grind because you want to have the best transformation. One of our members is doing, I think it's like $1,000 prize at his gym. The transformation will be on point. Remember, guys, the better the work, the harder you work, the better the grind, the more on point your cardio, the more on point your nutrition, the better results. And with Geneza Pharma supporting you all the way through, that you should get the best results possible. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It's our view and based on our experience and views on the topic. Our podcast are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.